Apologies, it's allergy season. Okay, let's close this. There we go. So I'm gonna insert some new stuff, some iPhone 10 stuff. Let's put a header here. That's fun, right? Let's insert. We have like a table view stuff, application, button style, table. There we go. You can insert some cells here and start building what your UI might look like. That's a good exercise for anyone who ever had to design and build their own app. Even if you're not a professional designer, you should understand the tools that your designers are going to use. Be able to open them, manipulate them, export it, create your own icons, do things that are not required, but definitely a nice to have skills that are important for any iOS developer. And why am I doing that right now? Because this is a zero to App Store, and we're learning how to become a developer from scratch. And if you're going to build your own apps, you're going to have to learn how to design them, prototype them, and do this work without writing one line of code. So I created a simple mock of what our screen could look like, and then we could start enhancing it, adding more objects. Let's say I want a add tab bar at the bottom. If we're going to have multiple tabs, for example, you can add that, and then start making your app look like something that would actually get to the App Store. So, for example, unlink it. Come on. How do I do that? I forgot. They changed a lot of things since I started using it. Is there unlink here? Okay, so I'm just going to copy it a couple of times. Let's just say we want to create. Does anybody remember how to unlink things in the new sketch?
It was actually asking me to unlink from library. Try double clicking on the cell.
Detach from symbol. There we go. Okay. Now I can rename things. If you're trying. Okay. Come on. Can you let me just do things? Unlink, detach from symbol. There we go. So we have the SwiftCoders LA. Let's make this a little bigger. And then we have today's meetup. Let's duplicate this. And today is 0 to App Store. What did we call it? Round 2. Round 2. User interface. Let's make this, I don't know, dark gray, because it's a subtitle, subheader. Let's look a little bit about what they do. So actually they do the opposite. They make the name of the group in gray and then the name of the meetup in dark gray or black. Doesn't matter, we're just experimenting with what a UI could look like. And then you can duplicate this, add the new row, and put here, this is SwiftCoders, right? And then we can do something more interesting with it in a second. Or Swift LA. We don't know what's the next meetup for Lawrence Swift LA.
I'll be the first one of the month, next month.
Okay, it's like Steven's doing something.
No, I won't. I'll be in Italy.
Oh, okay.
Raga's doing something.
Okay. He's not here. He's not going to get offended. So we just created a very simple UI. It's not sophisticated. That's fine. Doesn't need to be sophisticated. It just needs to be a simple UI that we could build just to even show what we're going to be working on, just to get it thought. You can do it in Sketch, you can do it on pen and paper. It doesn't matter. As long as you're doing something that doesn't come out of nowhere. You don't just open storyboards and stare at it and decide where things are going to go. You have to have a plan. You have to understand how things connect to each other. You have to have a vision of what your app is going to look like. And that vision might change. While you're building something, you're realizing that they can't work, or your data is not going to be available on this screen. It's only going to be available in the next screen. So you can hide that label. It doesn't matter what your vision is right now, but you can't build an app without a vision. And that applies to architecture on top of the design. That applies to whatever language you're going to use, whatever Xcode version. If you're going to build an app that's going to take 3-4 months, and you started a month ago, you would probably not build it with Xcode 9. Because you know, and you should, and if you don't, then you're learning it today, that in September, a new Xcode comes out every year. And if your app's going to be ready in December, that means that in the middle of your work, you're going to have to upgrade your version of Xcode. So it's good to know how long, or at least estimate, how long it's going to take to build an app, what tools you're going to be using, what your app's going to look like, and overall have an estimate of how much work is involved. Because you can't just blindly walk into an app and figure out it's going to take a month and find out it takes 6 months. And that happens. That's called bad estimates or non-existing ones.
Or feature creep.
Or feature creep. There's a lot of names for starting to work on something and realizing it takes a lot longer. If it's twice as long, that's okay. Usually it's worse. So we created a very rough sketch of what our app's going to look like. But just by creating this rough sketch, I can already understand what kind of objects I'm going to be using. For example, this is a table view. So I know I'm going to be using a table view. If I build something else, let's, for example, put a block here, round the edges a little bit, smoothen out, I don't know, 13. And then put a label in here, SwiftCoders LA. Create this one. Let's group it together and then duplicate it. If I design something like that, then I know that I'm not going to be using table views because this is clearly not a table. Even just by looking at this ugly design, I already have an insight on what my code could look like. So important to always look at the design, even if it's not perfect. Have something to start working with before you start building your UI. Second thing is, who can tell me what objects we're going to be using in our app? Just by looking at my design. Let's zoom out. What?
Meaning is an object. It's got a date. It's got
UI objects, but that's true.
Oh.
UI objects. What UI elements we're going to be using in our storyboard right now?
Labels.
We're going to be using labels. What's that here on top?
Those are button items.
Navigation controller. Tab bar controller. We already know what our app is what our code is gonna look like, just out of this dumb rough draft. That is why it's really important to have this design. Now there's something else we're not seeing here, and that's something that I find it's always missing, is how is this app going to adapt to different screen sizes? We have no idea, actually, what this might look like on an iPhone 5S, which is still supported. I know it's tiny, and the screen is really annoying, and the keyboard takes, what, 2/3 of the screen. We still have to support it. So this design actually doesn't give us the full picture. What we would potentially want from our designers is get an iPad design for the same screen. And then get another one for, we don't even have it here, an iPhone 5.
The SE would work.
Oh, I saw an SE there. There we go. iPhone SE. And this might look completely differently on an iPad. This might have a split view. We need to know we have a split view before we start building our app because it's going to be the root view controller of our storyboard. And yes, we're using storyboards, by the way. We're not doing any UI code right now. So the point of this exercise is not to learn Sketch, which is really nice and everybody should, is to get a feel for what the app's going to look like, what UI elements we're going to be using, what code we would need. If we see a lot of custom layout, a lot of custom UI, we're probably going to need to do some custom code. We can't see transitions here, but there are some more sophisticated designs that design tools that show the animations. Those things are really important to get before we start working, because one of these changes down the line can cost us a lot of work. Another nice thing we could do with this app, if we're building our own app and we don't have resources or we don't want to pay, we could create an app icon and generate it ourselves. So this icon here is built by Apple, this template, and we can select the glyph. Let's do that. Remove its content. Can remove the background as well if we don't want it, or change it to be white, for example, if we want, and then start dragging objects. Let's say I want my app to say SwiftCoders. I created this, make this a lot bigger, put this over here. So easily manipulated. Like, you could do whatever you want without having a designer work on that. How do I do something nicer? Okay, and then do I have the Swift icons? There we go. Swift logo. What do we want to use? Oh, this one's nice. Yeah, just a bird. Do we have it in color? Let's just take this one.
SVG, you should be able to change the color.
Yeah. Right.
Can you use an Apple logo without their authority?
What's that?
Can you use that logo without Apple's okay?
It's a good question. Don't ask. It actually does. Apple does license it. There's a big thread on it in the Swift forums. It's open sourced, but Apple has the rights for the logo. So you need to ask their legal department to use it. Let's just say I would try. In most cases, they're not going to come after you, but I don't know.
My guess is that you couldn't use it because it represents your product as an Apple product, which is something they wouldn't want.
Okay. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Where can that go? Why is it not going in there? Oh. It's not going in the icon.
I've been into some.
There we go. Okay. So I picked up the wrong one, or oh, that has this is what we need, right? Let's drag it over here, and now we can manipulate the image itself. Look, it has a background. Let's remove the shape. Now we get the Swift.
Okay, yeah, you can change this fill.
We can change the fill. Come on. We need this to go up. Where is it? There it is. Go up here. There we go. And this is an SVG I download directly from Apple. And what I want to do, I want to keep the ratio. I lock the ratio so when I extend it, make it bigger, it doesn't move. Now, how do I change the color of this thing?
A nice logo.
Can I?
I saw it.
Need to
Get together.
Yeah, open that. Yeah, there.
the shape. There we go. Let's get it out of this group. Ungroup it, and now we can change the fill to something cool. Like, let's make this orange. Make this.
Yeah, there's a computer.
Oh, I need to pick the color. It's not like that. I don't know. Cool. You know what? I would make the background black or like dark gray or black. I created this icon in like 3 minutes, right? This is pretty awesome that we could do those things without being dependent on somebody else. And now, because I'm using the template, where's the export? File, export. And then the template already exports all the icons for me. So if I hit export, it's going to ask me where to save it. I'm going to create a new folder here. SwiftCoders icon. Done. So now, let's go to my where is it? There it is, SwiftCoders icon. I can take all these, for example, go to my project, let's open it, and there's usually an app icon right here. Drag all these files here, and bam. In 3 minutes, we create an icon for our app. Now some are missing because we didn't generate it for an iPad for some reason, but or maybe things changed with the new iPhones. But if I'm gonna run my app now on an iPhone XS Max, we have an icon.
Just to see what that looks like when you do that.
Oh, oops. Okay, I'm not gonna do that. Doesn't work well with QuickTime. So we created an icon in under 5 minutes for our app. I think it looks pretty cool. I don't know what you guys think. I don't care. Nobody's paying me for it, so get over it. I'm kidding.
It's fantastic.
But a part of making the app is getting an icon in the app. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be that pretty. It's better than an empty icon. That is the point I'm going to make right now. I'd rather have an ugly icon than no icon. So let's just say this skill is a must-have if you're going to be a contractor, building your own apps, whatever. Pick up on Sketch and learn what I just did in 5 minutes. I know it's not easy to pick up on something new, especially if you're an engineer and what do you care about UI, what do you care about design? I think you should care. I think that's the beauty of building apps, is not just writing code. We're not server-side engineers yet.
Sketch is not that expensive. It's $99 and you get the
A
app
year.
for, well, it's $99, you get the app forever, but you only get updates for the year. So if you
Okay.
want to get the newest versions of it after that year, Sketch will work just fine. You just won't get any new updates. So it's still a good app to get.
And I would like to say as a beginner, it's easy to use.
Oh, you use Sketch. There you go.
For me, to say that, that's
Yeah.
gotta mean that it's pretty clear.
For anybody. I just watched some videos. Just how I learned Sketch. And then I went to our engineers, our designers, and sat with them, and they taught me more advanced stuff. But whatever I know is more than what most engineers should know. Now the next thing we could do with it, we create an icon here. But if we look at our design, we can create. Can we do that here? I don't think we have a template for that, right? But we can create icons for our, not just the app, but for buttons. It's really easy to do. I wonder if there's a template for that too. I think there is. Glyphs, no. Notification
So the
icon.
would be the button.
What's that?
The icon would be the button.
Yeah, exactly.
There's
We can make our own buttons.
There was one there.
Which one?
The underglyphs.
This one?
Yeah, navigation.
Yeah.
Toolbar placeholder. Yeah.
It's a
Um,
start.
I guess it's not a template though.
I know there's a template. Let's find it. Design resources. There we go. And they definitely have a template for Sketch. Let's download it. Add iOS Sketch library. Open the Sketch app. Oh, sweet. Oh, it's built in. Wow. I am so behind. I haven't done that ever. There we go. Now we got another library to use. Is it right here? Apple iOS UI. Symbols. There we go. So
R button. Yeah, under glyphs.
I wonder if we have templates here for buttons, or do I
R
just?
button right there. Look at all of them.
Well, we have those are the built-in ones. I was interested if we have the templates. It doesn't matter. Let's just create one. So I'm gonna create a new. I tapped A. I'm gonna create a new artboard. Those are those boxes that we're looking at. Let's make it, I don't know, 120 by 120, because Apple tells you what the size of every icon needs to be like. So if we go to the design guidelines, icons and images, custom icons, and I think they would tell me. There we go. So icons need to be 72 pixels by 72 pixels. For points, that's 24 by 24 on a X3 Retina display. So this is the size we need, 24 by 24, to make an icon. So I'm going to resize it to 24 by 24.
Are you familiar with something called Prepo?
Yes.
So how is that related to all this?
Prepo is not related. Prepo will take an image and cut it down to those 3 sizes. But we're not going to do that. You should probably never do that. We use PDF vector files, and I'm going to show how we do that. Prepo is the old way of doing
Okay,
things.
so
It's not going to be helpful anymore. So let's just create a new icon that, I don't know, does something funny, or just draw it. Let's draw a, help me out. I'm going to insert a line here and insert another line. No, I don't.
guess the real question is, what do we intend for this thing to do?
You know what? Let's
That's probably
create.
the better way to
Let's
start.
just create a circle.
Or are we just making it random? Bar button?
Yeah, an oval. We're gonna decide what the button does later. I just want to do something to show you what things could look like. So I'm creating this button. Let's make the border dark red, and let's fill it in with some orange, whatever. What does this button do? I don't know, but we created it. And now I can make the button exportable. I select the artboard by tapping on the name of it. I make it exportable. And then what Prepo would do for you is create those 3 PNG files in different sizes, which we don't need Prepo for that. We got Sketch to do that. But we want to do something different. I'm not going to use this iOS default setting. I'm going to set it to a PDF vector file. And the size is going to be 1x. So what a PDF vector file is not an image. It's a PDF file that contains the instructions to draw that image. And why is that better than just using images? Can anybody
You can scale it to any
tell us?
resolution.
You can scale
You
it.
get the new iPhone 10
Yes.
Max, and you can suddenly already support the screen size that wanted.
There you go.
But I've run into problems with this.
Yes.
Because it's instructions on how to draw this, it will keep the radius of things like that border set to the same radius that you have no matter what size you make that. I've found that it doesn't scale appropriately that way.
That's true. Okay, so there's two observations here, and let's talk about both of them. One is it contains its instructions. It's basically, think of it like code. When you create your own Bezier path, you can draw the Bezier path anywhere at whatever size you want. All you have to do is scale it and it'll work. You just need the instructions to know that you're creating a circle. What's the radius of it? It works the exact same way, but when you use Xcode and you drag that PDF file into your images, let's see, into your images assets folder, what it does, let's do it. Let's export it and then I'll show you. It'll be easier to see. I'm going to keep it 1x. And like Steven said, that's the maximum size this PDF file can be. If you use it on a bigger button, it's going to stretch it, even though it has the instructions. And why is that? Because Xcode will take the PDF and generate those PNG files itself. So I'm going to save it to this folder that we just had in the downloads, icon PDF, and you can preview it, and let's drag it onto Xcode. I drag it over here, and Xcode is still not smart enough to know this is a PDF file.
I don't know why.
I really don't know why, but we're gonna go to the inspector, and we're gonna change it. Not compression. Render as, no, I forgot. Scales, there we go. It's been a while since I've done that. Okay, I'm going to change it to single scale. And now we have one image that will know what size it needs to be by itself because we created it on this size, but it'll scale itself depending on the screen density or the pixel size. Yes?
So they made a new change to this with iOS 11.
They did. Yeah, we haven't gotten there.
Oh, okay.
But that's a good point. So we're not there yet. But this image has its own built-in size. The PDF knows what size it is. It's in the instructions. So Xcode will take that size and generate those three files, that 1x, 2x, and 3x, from this PDF file when we build and run our app. Meaning that that PDF is not scalable, but it will generate the appropriate sizes for us. Now, there's a way to make it scalable by checking this preserve vector data. Xcode will not generate those PNGs for you. It'll make your app bigger because it's going to save that PDF file with the instructions. But, what's that?
Smaller.
It would be smaller?
Well, the rasterized file is usually bigger than that. It's like for your circle, you only need like 5 instructions to draw.
Maybe. I
Versus
think
a couple lines.
so it has an impact on performance or something else, because Apple mentioned when you do that, it has an impact on your app in some
So it
way.
depends on how expensive your PDF is to draw. Right?
Okay.
Usually that's proportional to the amount of overdraw that you have.
Okay.
And I think this is the reason why they never included vector support earlier, because with a raster image you have a maximum upper bound of complexity, right? And that's proportional to the size of the image. With a vector, if you have a poorly architected vector file where somebody makes one vector for like 3 pixels or something like that, and several vectors.
Okay.
No, I'm just wondering.
Then it has.
I know I've done it.
Yeah.
So
So
you have to watch what you're doing.
yeah. So basically, what Josh is saying is vector files are like code. They basically are. They're instructions. And if those instructions are complicated and they have a lot of instructions in them, it's going to affect the performance of your app every time it tries to draw that image. So be sure when you use it, you understand what you're doing and that you're measuring the performance of your app when it's using this image if you choose to preserve the vector data. But what?
Sorry. For almost all small, like icon things, you should have minimal overdraw. So it should almost always be smaller and faster to use the PDF. Right? If you have a really complicated thing that has a lot of overdrop, then you should probably rasterize it.
Okay, it's good advice.
And also, there's a problem with the PDF spec, I think. For certain elements, it actually rasterizes them, and it rasterizes them in 1x. And then it's like drop shadows and some other stuff. So if weird things look pixelated, it's because of that.
Okay.
So you can rasterize them in all three resolutions if you have that problem.
That's good to know. So what we're doing right now is making this icon be able to grow beyond the initial size that we created it in. Why is that good? Let's say your designer decided the buttons need to be bigger, but your image is defined to be, where is my image? 24 by 24 pixels, which on a Retina display is times 3. So it's 24 times 3 for one device, and for Retina X2, it's 48 pixels. We call it the point size when we talk about iPhones, because points are the same for all devices, but the pixels might change. So you can have 2 pixels per point or 3 pixels per point. That's the X3 we're talking about. I don't want to go in there too deep, but if our icon is defined to be 24 points, then it can never be bigger than that. It's just going to be pixelized. But if we preserve the vector data, we can make it bigger, and it'll just draw it bigger because it knows the code to make the icon at any size we want. To your point. So we created a new icon, and now we could use it in a storyboard when we want to make buttons. Let me delete everything here. I was experimenting. Okay, so this is the intro to Sketch. We actually spent a lot of time on it, but I think it's important. We learn how to create a simple button that does something, and we can create as many buttons as we want. Let's duplicate this one, made a copy of it. Let's delete this button, and I can add text here. Ooh, this is huge. I can put text in my button, and you can put emojis in there. Now you're not allowed to use emojis. I'm giving you a tip right here. Apple will reject your app if you use their emojis in your app.
Yeah.
The only time you're allowed to show emojis if it's content from the user. You cannot put icons that are emojis or use them in your app in any way. But what you could do is take an emoji and modify it. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to change its color. There was a way to convert it into bitmap. Convert to outlines? Is that it? No. How do I bitmap it? Flatten. Does anybody remember? Combine, flatten selection to bitmap. There we go. So, oh, and I killed this poor thing. How did that happen? All right, maybe this shape is too complicated. Let's pick something simpler than this octopus. But
It's because you're at 1x, 20. So you have to do it for next.
okay, that's a good point. Let's try that. It's 72, right? Just to be sure. 72 by 72. Let's try this. Let's grab this octopus here. Put it in the middle. Let's make it bigger. There we go. And now we're going to try to flatten it. Layer, convert to outline, flatten to bitmap. Okay. That looks a little better, I guess. Okay, so now that this is a bitmap, this is a picture, we can start manipulating it in ways that Apple would know that it's their octopus. So we can rotate it, we can blend it with the background. I forgot how to do those stuff. But we can play with this icon and turn it into black and white, or cut it, or take something that is obviously too complicated for us to create, but we can manipulate it to look like something else. So this octopus might have been too ambitious because it's kind of a complicated image. But what I usually do is I go to those icons at the end that look like things that could be buttons. And then I take one of them and I convert them into a button, like this thing. Whatever that is. This is a very simple shape. So if I could make this shape a black and white and cut a piece out of it and rotate it, I can make my own button without learning how to draw. So let's go and do some UI with the little bit of time we have left.
What is the reason that Apple doesn't let you use?
It's their IP. They created those. That's their drawings. Yeah. It's not that you can't use emojis, but you can't use Apple emojis.
So you said you can't use their emojis, but what about just like a smiley face? Is that part of their emojis?
All emojis that are
Yeah.
in this collection here, where is it? All emojis that are in this collection, what's going on? There we go. All those are Apple emojis. You can go and use some Unicode characters if you want. These are Unicode characters that aren't protected as far as I know. So actually these also make good icons. And you can use them for free, I'm pretty sure. So if you have a button that needs like a circle or something like that, we drew it, but if there's anything a little more sophisticated that you don't know how to draw, you can use this to generate an icon. And it's really nice because some of them might look like icons that you actually need. So use, any kind of encoding you want, and you can generate an icon out of it. It's really easy with Sketch.
There's also for Google icons. You can find them.
Yeah, there was Open Emoji. I don't know where they went. They were free. I used them for my app. I don't know where to find them again. Okay, so let's see what code we have right now that we could use. We have a couple of controllers. We have this view controller that just loads a bunch of meetup groups and then their events and prints them out and puts them in a collection, an array. Or actually, this is dictionary. I created two new view controllers, events and event details. The events does the same thing, but we haven't created the UI for it. So it loads all the groups. I was trying to see if we could identify the last group so we can exit this loop and call a completion handler here. That would give us some events to use at runtime. Let's see if that works. Completion. Let's put this here. Let's create this bar. So what I'm doing, I'm basically loading things from the API. This is code we did in the last meetup. This value has no member groups because it's self here, and cannot subscript with meetup group. Why? I don't know. Let's put it back here. I've been experimenting with code before we. Oh, there we go. That's why. How did I call this? Events. So why doesn't it want to work? This is self.groups. There we go. That's why. I have a groups here, I have a group here, and I have self.groups. That's the confusion. So let's call this return groups, and then I could do this. Let's see if that fixes the issue because we have some collisions with the names here. There we go. Okay, so hopefully this works. I haven't tested any of it. When we build apps, we don't know if our code works. So this is good. This is a part of the program. How to not know what you're doing and learn while you're doing it, because we're all beginners of something. Like, doesn't matter how much experience you have not written any line of code, all different lines of code, or used all the frameworks out there. So you have to learn how to learn. This is the difference between a beginner and an advanced engineer. Not that they have all the knowledge in the world, but that they know and have the tools to find that knowledge when they need it. So we'll do something really simple because we don't have time to do any complex UI. I have a storyboard here, and this is our main storyboard that was created with the project. Main.storyboard, let's drag it out of the support here so we can access it. And the way storyboards work is they get launched automatically for you if you use segues and storyboards. And it's defined in the target that main is the first storyboard that's going to be presented when we run our app. So we're going to add a view controller. You know what? Let's add a table view controller to our app, because according to our design, we're going to be using table views. Let's embed this table view in a navigation controller and make this navigation controller the root view controller. Initial. It's going to be the root of the window. The initial view controller, if you ever done that in code, when you create your window in the app delegate, you have to create a root view controller for that window so that it shows something. This checkbox does that for you. That's why I like storyboards, because instead of writing code, I just put a checkbox in, and that's what it did. It added this arrow. Now you can drag it and make any view controller be the first one. So we're going to start our app with a navigation controller that points to a table view controller. Let's make this table view controller. Don't forget, set the class on your table views or they're not going to do anything. This event view controller that we just created. Let's go to events view controller. And this is already a subclass of table view controller. Now, who can tell me what are the 3 requirements to get a table view working? What methods do we need to implement?
Well, you need to tell it how many rows there are, how many sections there are, and what's the third one?
Software.
There you go.
Sorry.
You need the count. You need to tell the table how many rows it has, how many sections if you have more than one, and provide the rows for each of those. Provide the actual cell so the table can present it. So let's go ahead and implement the number of rows in section. We're going to have one section, so if you just leave it by default, it's going to do 1. And this is going to be our, we actually haven't saved it anywhere. So let's start with that. Let's create our viewDidLoad method. Super viewDidLoad. And then we're going to call load events that we have here. And the completion is going to give us a bunch of events. Let's save them somewhere. Let's put it in our own private var events. Now, I'm doing some things here that might not be the best way. So we're not using a central repository. So each view controller is going to hold its own data. And since this, actually this could be empty. Since these events don't have a value, we have to find a way to load values into them because we can't inject it. If you've used dependency injection, there's nowhere to inject it from because we don't have this data just yet. So I'm going to start by loading this data in this view controller. This is the first view controller that we have. And then we can inject the data, send it to the next vController. So what we're going to do now is load these events, and when we're done loading them, we're going to save them somewhere for the table to access them, and then we're going to tell the table to reload itself. Because if the table started loading before our callback, before this got called, then it's going to show 0 rows. Because what we're going to do here is going to return, we don't need that, events.count. It's going to be 0 the first time. Now we're going to need a cell for row at index path. And this function requires us to go and set some things up in the table. So we're going to go pick a cell here. Let's start small and then upgrade from there. So we're going to make our cell, which is not showing anything right now. This is broken. Okay, let's open storyboard again. Clean up storyboard. Let's pick our cell. There we go. And we're going to define the type of it. It's going to be a subtitle cell. Why? Because that's easy. So we're going to start with that. And then when we move on, we're going to change it to a custom cell, create our own cell class, and modify it. But for now, let's use this. And one thing that the default doesn't do for you is make it adaptive. So instead of using a system font with fixed size, I'm going to use a subheader or a headline here and make the subtitle a subheader. Cool. What that means is that our cells are going to expand if we change the font or the text size in our settings. And I'll show you what it looks like. So we got our cell, and what are we missing to be able to fetch this cell in code? How do we connect this cell to our code? What's that? Yes, but not yet. What's that? Reuse identifier. Exactly. I think you said that's it, right? Okay, we're going to give it the name cell. Why? I don't know. I always use cell. It's easy to remember, and all the cells have the same name. If you have more than 2 cells in one table, more than 2 cell types, then start giving it meaningful names. But if you only have 1 cell everywhere, I don't find a reason to think too hard of giving them good names, because who cares what the name of the cell is? So what happens here is that this function has to return a cell. You can't fail. You have no opportunity to return nil here. You need to return a cell. Have to. No matter what happens or your app crashes. So this is very sensitive. We have to make sure we get everything right. So we're going to dequeue the cell with the exact name. I copied and pasted it of the identifier that we put in. Because if I had misspelled it, my app would crash. You can't guard here, and if it doesn't give you back anything, return. You can't do that. So make sure the identifier matches the storyboard. And then put the index path here. And if we had our own special size, cell class, this is an opportunity for us to cast it into whichever cell we need. But we don't have it yet, so we don't need to do that. And we can return the cell. Now, in the space here, what we need to do is set up the cell. And as we evolve, we're going to make this more modular and cleaner. But right now, I'm just going to grab the cell, has a title label, right? A text label with the text. So let's get the event that we need from our events.
Can I make a comment here?
Yes.
This thing really tripped me up because I had been using customized cells to begin with.
Yes.
When I went to this cell, I also tried to create an outlet for these things, and you don't need an outlet in this case.
You don't. That's correct.
because it's got pre-built references
Yes,
to these two fields.
that's true.
So that's if you're a beginner, that could that could drive you up a wall because
Yes, and you can't, in your custom cells, you can't use any of the existing properties.
that's right.
And there's a couple more tools besides those.
You had a question, right?
Yeah,
No,
the
okay.
image.
And the brand accessory.
Yeah.
So let's find our event. If you notice the way I define the events here, let's put it down here so we can see it. I create a type alias. We store our events in a weird data structure. Why? Because our data comes in a very non-clean way. First we load the groups, and then for each group we load the events. Technically there could be 2 sections, but I don't want to show sections yet, so we're not going to do that. But what we need to do is we need to make this an array, because this is not sorted in any way. So what I'm going to do when I load my events is I'm going to change the way this looks to be an array. And let's do that now. Instead of a dictionary, because dictionaries are not sorted, and our data needs to be consistent for the table to work. Whatever is in index 00 has to stay in index 00 no matter how many times you fetch it. So let's create an events array here. And what we're going to store in it, it's not the best way to do it yet, but I don't want to manipulate the data too much, so we're just going to make it simple and dumb. It's going to contain the meetup group and the meetup event in a tuple. And the way we're going to do that, let's do that, I like this syntax better, is when we set this up, it's set, I'm going to convert that into an events array. Why am I doing that? We could do it here actually, and it'll be cleaner, but we can modify the code as we go on. So I wonder if we can actually do it somewhere else. So I'm gonna loop on our events. Oops, that's Hebrew. For event and events. Actually, that gives me the key and the value, right? So that's what? That's group and events, right? Am I correct? Group and events. There we go. So we're just going to accumulate that into our events array. So first we're going to reset our events array to be empty, because this might run multiple times. We don't want to append to it because we're going to duplicate our data. So we're going to reset it, and we're going to start appending the values in the dictionary and just convert it into a matrix instead, into an array with 2 columns, if you want to see it this way. So the group is going to be duplicated for each event, and that's a hint about how we can refactor our data later on to clean it up. If the group is duplicated per each event, then we could just have the event save its own group. Now technically the event does have its own group returned from the JSON, but it doesn't have enough data for us to use. It just has a name and ID, but we would need a little bit more than that. That's why I'm saving the group separately. Yes?
Before you run this for loop, don't you want to sort the events or events dictionary, because that can come through in any order?
But that is a good point.
Yeah.
Hopefully the events themselves are already going to be ordered, because there are only 2 groups. So the only thing that's might be out of order is the groups themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But the events are stored in an array, so they're already going to be ordered in whatever order they came from the server. So we don't really have to do any sorting, but we could see what that would look like.
Okay.
And by the way, this method could be later converted to a functional method that can convert dictionaries to array like we could use reduce or something else, but we're gonna keep it simple for now.
We should use it for a sequence.
Or zip, yeah. There's a lot of nice ways to do it. But we're gonna start with something simple so everybody can read it and understand what they're doing, and then we can evolve our code later on. So don't over-engineer. Don't over-architect. Don't try to solve problems with efficiency and performance and memory, because most of the time you're not going to have problems. If your code is simple and it works, that's good enough. Don't try to over-complicate things, because it's going to backfire later on. And that's the first rule. Make it simple and refactor later. Don't do anything fancy in the beginning. So I'm going to append a group and events. Actually, that's not going to work. We need to loop on each event for event and events, and then append to our array. So we have two loops going on. One for every group, and then one for every event in the group. And we're going to take all these and flatten them out to an array that we can show to the table. Remember, tables are dumb. They don't know anything about your data, and they don't understand that your data has multiple sections and multiple rows. All the table cares about is getting one cell at a time. And you have to make sure your data works that way. So we're going to dumb it down for the table. So we're going to create a group and an event array here. Did I do it right? What am I missing? Conform to sequence. Let's try to append it. Oh, that's why. You can only append arrays to arrays, not elements. If I had wanted to do it with this syntax, I would have to create an array with one object. So I don't know which one. Any preference? Let's use append. Just because. Okay. So we created our array here, and then this runs synchronously. So as soon as we set it, this will happen, and then we reload the data. So let's see if that works. Now we have our events. Now we're going to get our events array, and this array is flattened, so all we need is the row. Now if we had made this events in a different format, this events array, and put sections in it and create a deeper hierarchy, so we would have two sections, and then each section would have its rows, that would work as well. And then we wouldn't have to, well, basically we couldn't do it anyway. I was going to say we wouldn't have to duplicate the groups, but then if we do that, we won't even have the groups, because you can only put one object in it anyway, so we would still have to put both of them in different sections. Does that make sense, or did I make it too complicated? Basically, right now, there's no way for us to not duplicate the group for each event. So don't think about it, everything's fine. Okay, let's get our group. What do we have from an event? Well, this is not just an event, it's an event and a group. So it has a 0 and a 1 because we never gave them names. But if we do want to give them names, it's going to be our group and our event. So this is a tuple. It's one object that combines multiple objects into it. So we have an event. Let's call it object. We have an object here that contains an event, and it contains a group. So we can grab the name of the group here, and then cell.detail text label .text. We can grab the event for this and give it a name. Now, we haven't tested our code yet, Let's see if anything works.
Still haven't sorted your groups.
Haven't what?
Still didn't sort your groups.
Why do you need to sort them? There we go. Okay, so I have a bug here. Let me show you again, and you can tell me what the bug is. The table is empty, but when I start scrolling, things appear. What am I doing wrong?
Something to do with your nav bar?
Nope. If you know the answer and you're Josh or Steven or Brian, don't say anything.
I can't fully see, but is that the queue you're assigning it on? You're not on the main queue now.
What's that?
You're not assigning the text on the main queue.
Yes. Thank you, E-Man. Oh, and Xcode even told me. Yes. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Xcode. So, operation queue.main. There's different ways to do it. I'm doing it like this, but another way would be dispatch queue or dispatch.
Just such good.
Yeah, I just misspelled something here. There we go. Dot main dot async. So these two basically do the same thing. I like this better because before dispatch queues were objectified in Swift, they were C syntax.
Yeah.
Did anybody use them before they were in Swift? Do you remember what it looked like?
Yes.
Yes.
Look it up every single time.
You know what I'm talking about. So operation queues are object-oriented wrappers for Grand Central Dispatch. This used to be C API. Still is, but Swift kind of makes it look nice. And this one is Objective-C or object-oriented, which looks way better and cleaner. So I developed a habit of using operation queues instead of GCD. There's not a lot of differences if you're just doing simple calls, but if you want to keep track of operations, you can do that. You can put them all in a queue. You can make it a serial queue, a parallel queue. You can cancel operations. You can create dependencies between them. All that you can do with a GCD. Not saying it's not possible. It's just nicer, cleaner, easier. There are no limitations in GCD, just a lot more code.
I have a question about this. So what's actually happening when you go operation main dot add operation, the reload waits for the download of the other thing? Because,
No.
What's going on?
So the load events function, let's look into it. The load events function or method calls our meetup API get groups.
Right.
This one does get endpoint. We wrote this code in the previous meetup, and it calls get endpoint, this function that we created here. And this one makes a asynchronous call to URL session, data task with URL. If you look at this, if the documentation of this method, you can read about the completion handler, and it says, where does it say that? Does it say on which queue it's running?
And that's
It might.
off the main queue. So
Usually it says it. I'm not seeing it right now. But if it's not saying it, you're gonna assume that it does not, unless otherwise specified. Any asynchronous network call will not be returned on the main queue.
right.
So as soon as you made this call, we're off the main queue, which you don't want it to be on the main queue because it's a network call and you don't want your app to freeze until your response comes back.
Right.
So that's totally fine. What you have to remember is when you're done processing your data, off the main queue, because we're looping and updating events and creating arrays, and if we have 10,000 objects here, it could take 3 seconds, it could take 5, it could take a million, who knows. You don't want to freeze your app and disable user interaction. So it's good that this is happening off the main queue. But as soon as you're updating your screen, as soon as you're touching UI, back to the main queue. So this is the important thing to remember. And Xcode now tells us at runtime when we're off the main queue, and this is on by default in your scheme settings. Main thread checker. We can actually enable pause. Let's do that.
Wait, so is that waiting for the main, for that operation to be done? Is that what's going on? I'm not understanding how it's working.
You have multiple concurrent.
Right, you have an asynchronous call, and you have the screen.
They're both asynchronous.
Well, they're both going on, but how is this essentially making them work together?
They're just being called one after another. The only difference is they're being called on different queues. So you have an operation queue that does a network call, and as soon as the network call ends, it creates a new operation here. After it was done, this was already done, but that time this line of code is being executed. Whatever happened before is done. Your network call was done. And then it tells the UI, now perform this. Yes, Brian.
I'll ask his question in a different way. If you put two print statements, one inside the main block and then one immediately after it outside the main block, which one executes the majority?
The one after.
We don't know.
Oh.
We don't know. Because the main queue might be backed up. The main queue might be busy doing other things. You don't have control on when things are executed or in which order, because different queues are not your responsibility. If you create your own queues and you create dependencies between the operations, then you can control the order of the operations.
Right.
But what we're doing here is just sending things off to the system, and the system will do whatever it needs to do whenever it's comfortable for the system to do them.
I'm sorry, I'm still looking. You've got a request for data to be downloaded.
Listen, this is complicated. I get it. I don't want to
I'm
slow
asking
down.
a very simple question.
I understand, but the explanation is not simple, and
It's 2 lines of code there, so it can't be that complicated.
I understand that, but concurrency is complicated, and we should definitely have a talk about concurrency. But this is not the right time. This is more complicated than we can explain in 2 minutes. So yes, Iman.
I'm gonna ask a question about concurrency hopefully this is simple, if it's not we can talk about it another time, but I've been trying to wrap my mind more around when a value is captured within a closure, when should you have a weak reference? So for example, right now, when we're saying kick this back to the main queue and execute it at a future time, we're capturing self, right? And we're self, table view, all that. So why is it safe here to just keep a strong reference to that self there?
For a few reasons. One, you want to capture self because you don't want self to disappear on you when this code is executed. You want the table to exist when you're trying to reload it. Does that make sense?
But it wouldn't be that big of a deal if self wasn't there either.
It wouldn't be a big deal. But in this case, we want self to be there. And another thing is this is the root view controller of our app. It's important to know those things. It's important to write your code to not be dependent on which is the root view controller. But in this specific case, the root controller will almost definitely will never go away.
Let me put it this way. Is
Almost.
it because you know this is an operation and it'll stay on operation queue only for so long before it gets executed and then it's released, I guess? Is that
It is
why?
released. There's no retained cycle, if that was your question.
Okay.
There's no retained cycle because the operation itself is not being retained by self. So self is not pointing to the operation.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Only the operation is pointing back to self.
Okay.
So there's no cycle here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that. Okay, so I don't want to get too much deeper into it, but yeah, I definitely.
I know everything with concurrency, everything with queues is complicated, and these are all good questions. but I want to get to our UI,
Yeah, definitely.
so I don't want to be stuck on 3 lines of code the whole
The really
time.
short answer though is that if it's an escaping closure, then you should consider your captures and methods. If it's not an escaping closure, there's no escaping annotation there.
But wouldn't this be an escaping closure? Because you're running like closure off some other.
But you're not. There's no other asynchronous call after that.
Load events, though.
It's
If you
escaping,
kind
the other one is escaping, yes. So you
Okay.
consider it
Yeah.
at that point.
Okay.
So what I did here is I went to the scheme settings and I checked this pause on issues under the main thread checker. And what happened is I noticed that I had a problem before I saw it in Xcode. But if you enable the setting, Xcode will stop you before you even get to seeing the problem. And it stopped me here and it told me this is executed off the main thread. And that's when you know, and maybe in the future Xcode would be smart enough to propose a solution as well and not just tell you. But this is the solution in most cases. Put it in the main queue. Okay, so the basic functionality of our app works. We managed to get data from the API, parse it into structs using the Codable protocol, and then load it onto the screen. Now the next step would be to follow our awesome design. I get the credit for it, by the way. Where is it? Minimized it, right? That's not it. Oh, it's right here. Follow our awesome design and put some more thought into what our cells would look like. So let's go to a preview and maybe try to make things look like that. And then we can work a little bit. We got, do you guys want to take a break and then we'll continue, or should we work till 9 and we're done? Let's vote on it. Continue or take a 10-minute break? Anybody that says break, raise their hand. Anybody that says continue, raise their hand. Okay, I'm sorry, this is a majority rule. There's democracy here. Okay, so let's just hard stop at 9, hang out for a little bit, and then we're good. So what we're gonna do is make our cells a little more sophisticated and use some stack views inside. And the one thing I wanted to show you is, where is our accessibility tool? Let's open it. Accessibility inspector. Okay, so I got my accessibility inspector right here. Let's open the simulator. Let's connect it to my simulator and make things bigger. Whoa, whoa, wow. See that? If you're blind and you're 90, this is what your phone would look like. But you're not gonna miss any text because we made it adaptive.
Did you make your table view auto resize?
No,
Like the auto resize cells?
no, this is Xcode 10. We live in the future.
Xcode 10 is nice. That's freaking nice. Now I want Xcode 10.
Automatic, right there.
that's
I think
beautiful.
Xcode 9 does that
think
too
Xcode
for some
10 does
things. Yeah, I think Xcode 10 added
That's probably because I use Zibs all the time.
for sections or something like that.
The thing, dynamic size.
And an inspector of the table. I just selected the table and went here, and you can do the same for sections. We don't have section headers, but you can do the two. Awesome, right?
It's beautiful.
We live in the future.
Tool.
That's why you use the latest version of Xcode. I'm pretty sure 9 has that too, by the way. It's got less features, but 9 does that as well.
Taking looks.
I think there was a bug in 9, and you checked that, but it still doesn't work. Or maybe it's because maybe it's only for iOS 11 actually. So if you're running on iOS 10, this might crash. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show you. Why I selected a text and made it not fixed size, but I used those font styles, the text styles. These styles grow and shrink with the settings of the system. And it is important, very important that you do that, not just because it looks good, Well, because you never know what your users are going to do with their app. And if your text gets cut, you get bad reviews, people delete your apps, or they just become not functional and you lose either way. So remember to do that when you use anything, including tables and collision views. You found that, right?
I don't think that actually works in Xcode 9. Or
You might have to run it to make it work.
No, I've tried it. Like, it's been checked.
Well, if your code changes it, then whatever is in the storyboard is going to be overridden by the code.
I had to
If
put
your
the
code
I
is
had to
setting
put,
it?
I had to put the code to make it do it.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So let's make our cells look a little better. Let's see what the Meetup app is doing. We're gonna build a Meetup app, and then we're gonna make it better than them, and they're gonna pay us to get it. Maybe. So I'm gonna change my cell to be. First of all, select the cell itself. There we go. We're gonna make it a custom cell. If it's not custom, it's not gonna let you drag views onto it. Once you make it custom, you need to do what? Create a class. We need to create a custom class for our cell. Make all your classes final, always. Why? It's faster, it's safer, and how often do you subclass your own classes? Almost never, right? If you do, you'll get a warning or a failure, and you can go and remove the final. But this is going to improve your compile time and your runtime, because your compiler and the runtime doesn't need to go. What up? Is it locked?
Okay.
Your compiler does not need to know at runtime that there are multiple classes that this could be and go and find which type it is. Your compiler will know that this class cannot be subclassed and it's fixed. Amen. So by using final, you make your code safer because you don't accidentally subclass your own classes, and you make it faster as well. So let's call this a event cell. Why am I hesitant? Because no, we're not going to have another table with cells. Okay, so this one needs to be a subclass of a table view cell for it to work. And because we're creating our own, we don't get to get the default labels. So we have to create the labels that we're going to put in our cell. So we're going to have a, help me out, what are we going to put in our cell?
put the name.
Group name, label, right? UI label. What am I forgetting?
IB outlet.
IB outlet.
Weak core.
IB outlet. I don't do weak anymore. Apple said in one of their talks a couple years ago, don't do weak.
Really?
Honestly, I don't think it matters. We had this discussion before.
It doesn't matter. The superview owns the subview, so they're retained by the superview, so you don't technically have to take an outlet to it. You just have to remember that if you reassign an outlet, that it drops, or if you remove from the superview, that it's going to drop the outlet.
If you make it weak.
Yeah. There's nothing in return.
So if you manipulate your cells at runtime, or your hierarchy at runtime of outlets, since people make outlets weak, which is not wrong, but if you make your outlet weak and then you remove it from the superview at runtime, you have no pointer to it because the weak pointer is going to lose, it's going to kneel out and lose its value, and the superclass, not the superclass, the super view that had a strong view to this outlet is also going to lose it because you removed it from the super view. Your outlet's going to kneel out and you can never put it back. So technically, weak is better if you know that you're going to remove things at runtime and you don't want to keep them. But in most cases, you're not going to do it. And it's better to hide a view than remove it from the super view because it's easier to manage and it has less impact on constraints. So if you make it weak or not, it doesn't matter. If anybody ever comes to you and complains, send them to me. And I'll tell them I'm not interested in talking about it. And you're good.
One thing that I think you should do though is make them private. Which
Um,
I don't know why they don't do that.
You won't do it to a cell though, right?
I do, because I put everything in configure, so.
You do? Okay. So there's different approaches. Do you put the configure in an extension of the cell, or do you put it in the cell?
I put it in the software.
So the cell technically gets a data object, a model object, and configures itself, which is a violation of MVC, right?
It's usually
Is it a yes or no? Okay, still.
It's a new model for the cell.
Well, what Josh is saying is he's going to create a function called configure, which again, I'm not against, I'm just making some observations, and it's going to get a model object, right? A meetup event or meetup group, right? What is the problem here? This is a view object. What is that? A model object. Model objects and views don't communicate in MVC. There's a double yellow line between them. They don't cross. And when you do that, you violate this rule, this separation of concerns. Now, a way to go around it, which is what I do because I think the configure is very useful, I extend the cell and I put it here. Why is it not a violation when you put in an extension? Eman.
So I stay up late at night thinking about stuff like this. See if that's right.
Okay.
So
Just-
the core
just a
class, like the event cell class, still doesn't, like its functionality as an encapsulated object doesn't know anything about the model. We're adding an extra layer outside of it, and we're extending its functionality. So that's a little different. You could have easily made a separate class instead of an extension that spit out different cells depending on the model. But as long as the core object itself has no knowledge of the model, I think it's fine.
There you go. We got Eman's approval. I'm good.
So you would consider the extension of the event cell to be part of the controller?
I
layer,
would, yes.
because it doesn't logic.
Now, it's all technical nonsense because when you compile it down, it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah.
But, and we are also putting everything in the same file, so it definitely does not make a difference because the code is together. But let's say we don't own the cell, or we put the cell in a different file and put it in a framework or whatever. That cell will not know anything about this configure method. And if we put that cell in a different file and then make this extension private, then this cell will never have knowledge of its own extension. Because this extension would be private to the controller, which is what you just said. That's why I consider that separated, because the cell and the extension never communicate with each other. And I would make this extension private in this specific case. But if we have more view controllers and this cell is reusable, it might not be a bad idea to make this extension public. As long as you understand that the cell does not know anything about meetup events, because cells don't know what meetup events are. And even those names of the labels are kind of off, because those labels borrow the names of the event, which the cell does not know about. That's a gray area. But as long as we're not violating our own principles, I'm fine with wherever you put the configure. So what we're going to do here is make the cell. We already wrote the code, so let's just do that. We're going to make the cell configure itself. Well, we're missing something. What are we missing? Why doesn't the cell know about its own configure method?
Because it's not an event cell.
Because
It
it's
doesn't
not an
know it's
event
an
cell.
event cell.
There we go. So I'm going to do something terrible here and make it, force it an event cell. Now, there's different approaches about what I'm doing here. This is the most common pattern. You're going to see it everywhere. And I'm pretty sure Apple does the same thing. This is not the best way to do it because it could crash. But we only have one type of cell here. And we don't have to know in different cases what kind of cell it is because there's only one and there will never be another cell. If we did have different cells here, this method would look completely differently. And we would dequeue the cell and then switch on its type before casting it onto whatever we think it needs to be. Or we're going to build a more sophisticated mechanism that has different identifiers here and generates a cell per each identifier. There's different ways to do it. But we only have one cell, so I don't feel bad forcing the cell to be whatever class we know it's going to be anyway. And now the configure method is going to work. Now we're missing something here. We actually need a group as well. So I'm going to add a meetup group here. And now we can send this object into the cell. Let's see if it builds. There we go. Now, because the cell is a part of this file, we can make this file private. Does that make sense? We can actually do something else. We can make it private. Why can we make it private? Does it know? What's that? How would an extension know about a private property in a different class? Does anybody know?
Well, it's an extension on the same class, right? So doesn't it
Yes.
give you visibility into it?
Yes. So, starting from Swift,
Yes.
was it 4 or? Yeah? Private extensions. Extensions on classes in the same file can see private properties. Does that make sense? So in the past you would have to make this file private. But that means anybody besides the extension can see into the cell. I don't want the view controller to look into the cell. So I'm going to make it private, and starting from Swift 4, I guess, I forgot. Those extensions in the same file of the same class can look into private properties. And that is a very good separation of concerns because only the extension can access the cell and nobody else does.
So what would happen if you went back to the scenario you were talking about earlier, where the definition of a class is in some other file, you can't modify it?
It would not work.
Then it would work if they made it private.
Yeah, but since this is a cell and it's a reusable object, there's no need to make those private. You would make everything else private, meaning properties that don't need to go outside. So this is a good property to make private, for example, which we were using it somewhere else. Interesting. Where are we accessing it that it's giving me a hard time? But, oh, yeah, because this is not inside. Where is it?
It's inside that function, so you know.
Yeah, why is it complaining? What?
It's a local.
Oh!
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay.
This is not a property. This is this is a variable. Okay, yeah, that's why I didn't make it private. Okay, apparently I know what I'm doing. So this is private because nobody needs to access my own data store. Nobody needs to see my events. This is private because nobody needs to see my events array. This is for the table. Question?
Yes, you did that new export 10 feature where you drag multiple rows. What did you hold down to do that?
This.
Where you like drag the 3 rows, like it's like you.
Yeah, you should block
Hold
selection.
on.
Oh, you mean block selection? I forgot. What was it? Option?
Just do it naturally.
I don't know. Now you're asking me. I forgot.
You just did it.
I don't
Oh,
You
know.
did like 3 lines down, like just hold option, drag it
I was just curious if you
using the touchpad.
Is it control?
Yeah, it's option.
Option, right?
Option, yeah.
Yeah, it's been there for ages. At least
Yeah, but
since,
it's
like,
more
X6.
powerful.
Okay, we'll figure it
You
out.
actually type with it.
That's
Yeah.
few. If you
So
need
it's
to
like
edit
almost
multiple
as good as
rows, you can
stuff.
select multiple rows and edit all of them at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we need to
Yeah,
do
it's like
is
yeah, exactly.
put
But like X, like all you can do is delete, and like you can't like move the cursor to different areas. Now you can.
what am I missing here? Wait,
Model.
You need to do model.
like wait, what am I doing? I need to write some code. Okay, group, event, name label. Now we haven't created those labels yet in the storyboard. This is still not gonna work. We're gonna crash as soon as we run this code. Model.event.name, and there was the date name label dot text model.event dot local dates, and I think I had something model.event.time. Okay. So we have the cell. We put all the code we need into it, but we forgot to hook it up. Always remember to set your classes on your objects, or things are just not going to work. Let's hide this one here. Let's pick our cell and add, oh my god, this is terrible. They moved it from down here to here, and every time you drag something, it goes away. And there was a shortcut. What was the shortcut?
Something else.
Show library, yes. Okay, now I don't have to do it every time because I just need to copy my labels. So I just command duplicate them. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in a,
Stack view.
how did you call this icon in one of your,
I mean, it's not.
the transformer or something? What did you call it?
No, we got TIE
Oh, yeah,
fighters.
TIE
We've
fighter.
got graphing calculator. So we got the triangle TIE fighter, the square TIE fighter.
This is like for Commodores or something, right?
It's
The triangle one that
It's the triangle
collapses.
TIE fighter.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I'm going to put it in
TIE
stack
fighters.
view.
That's all they have.
Oh, this got sophisticated. You can embed in a bunch of things. Oh, wow, you can unembed.
I didn't bend it.
This is stuff. Okay, I created a stack view here, and this is the magic. Stack views are gonna make your lives amazing. Now, don't nest too many stack views and stack views and stack views and put them in cells, because sometimes they get confused and the sizes are off. But use them as much as you can until they break. And then start going back and embedding things, because it can happen. So the first thing we need to do is start by connecting our labels, and then we can work on some layout. We got 6 minutes, so let's see what we can get in 6 minutes. This one is a group name. This one was event name, and this one was the date. So make things look nicer. So this could be light gray, this could be dark gray, and the date could be light gray. Let's see what it looks like in, where was it? Oh, it's in preview. Where are you, preview? Darker gray, lighter gray, and like super dark grays. This could be, let's modify it and start using different shades of gray. Okay. Now we're gonna take our stack view right here, and we're gonna put it in the cell in a way that is gonna fit whatever size the screen is going to be. So I'm gonna constrain it to the margins, and I'm gonna, it doesn't have any default values. So I'm gonna put it 0, 0, 0 to the margins. Okay, and I'm going to show you a cool trick. Tables. Where are you, stack view? Tables have a special property, sorry, that Well, where
You're gonna
is
take it
this?
again.
Where
It's not a deselected.
did I miss it? Where is it? Is it on the? It's on the table view, right? Why am I not seeing
Is
it?
it on the table view control?
No. Oh, it's right here. Oh. Insets to safe area. There we go. So, our content view, this thing, it's the view inside the cell that holds your content. This content view is going to inset itself. The table is going to do it for us to get out of the way if the notch is in there. So let me show you what that looks like. We're going to flop our table on its side. And then I'm going to uncheck this. Oh, do you see what happened? The table does that for us. So when you're inside your content view, you know that your content is not going to hit or touch the safe area that's right here.
If
think
you
we
had something in your cell, like an image that you didn't particularly care if it got blocked by the notch, you could uncheck it. For
Yes,
that cell.
exactly. So that's a good comment. If you want to put background on your cell and you want your background to not be interrupted by the safe area, you want it to extend all the way, then you're going to have to do two things. You're going to have to put it in your content view, and I don't know if the background view, but there's a background view you can use. But let's say you put it in a content view and you want it to go under the notch. Then you're going to have to uncheck this setting, and when you do, you have to use a different property to make your labels not touch the safe area instead. And the way to do this is to go into your content view and add the safe area layout guide right here. And now the safe area is visible inside your content view. And then you make your margins follow the safe area, and you would actually want to do something else, is follow readable width. What readable width does is when you show text on a giant wide screen, it's kind of hard to read. If you have one paragraph on an iPhone, but you put it on an iPad in landscape mode, you're going to get one really long line of text, which is almost impossible to read because your eyes don't move that far. If you check this, and I don't know why it's not default, I guess because they need to know if you need to know if you're using text or not. But if you use readable width margins, then they will shrink themselves automatically, magically. Apple did the math for you, you don't have to know, to fit whatever comfortable size it is to read. So if you have larger fonts, bigger text, and we're going to set it up to be adaptive, which we haven't done yet. So if your user uses the accessibility settings that we just used before and made text a lot bigger, then your readable width is going to grow. Because then if the line shrinks and the text grows, you're just going to have one letter per column, or one letter per row, or one worst case, one letter. At best case, you might have a word or two, right? So this is magic that we want to use because it's free and because it's a part of the adaptive layout that Apple gives us. And we need to make sure our apps work in all orientations and all screen sizes and hopefully in all devices. Because it's so easy to make your app work on an iPad. Why not just do it from the beginning and just make it work the first time? So we're not going to talk more about margins today because we're out of time. But remember those three checkboxes. Question?
What is the next?
I don't know yet. Depends when Steven's going to be sick again. I'm kidding.
Right.
Let's just connect it to show you that it works. It is connected. Let's make our text adaptive, and it's red, and I'm going to show you why. Can anybody tell me why the layout is red?
No height constraints.
Nope.
Your stack you just set to fill. You want to
Yes.
have some sort of
Yes.
rule for how it's filling.
That's gonna be headline. It's gonna be bigger, I guess. A large title, and this one's gonna be a subheader. Okay, so the reason why it's complaining, it's because our stack view is trying to set the heights of these three labels. But these labels want to hug their content. That means they want to shrink to be as small as they can without clipping their content. But we made our stack view stretch from the top to the bottom of the cell. But the labels want to be small, and the stack view wants to make it bigger. How do we make them all work? There's multiple ways. If you look at this warning here, it's going to suggest changing the priority of the hugging of one of the labels to make one of the labels expand. That might be a good idea. The reason why it doesn't matter is because this is a table with auto-sized cells. So the cells are going to shrink themselves to fit the content no matter what. But I don't want to see warnings in my storyboard because it might mask other real warnings. So I'm going to solve it by changing the distribution of my stack view. You can make it fill proportionally, and it'll just decide which label gets to be big. But if you just want to keep it on fill, another solution would be to make the priority of the bottom constraint smaller. Let's say 250, I guess. Or keep it required and make it greater than or equal. And then the stack view is not forced to be stuck to the bottom. It could be a 0 or greater as from the bottom. So it will shrink, we just saw it shrink, to be able to satisfy its constraints without breaking anything. Yes, E-Man.
This is a suggestion for one more way. Like you could select one of the subviews of the stack view and go to its content building priorities, the vertical ones, and just change the priority on one of them.
Yeah, that's what the error suggested to fix.
Okay.
But I don't want to do that. I want a solution that is a little more visible
I see.
and that is not based on priorities. Because our cell's going to grow and shrink to fit, doesn't matter what the priorities are. So I think it's a cleaner solution to make the labels show the size they're going to be at than to make one of them expand.
Okay, so either you make the stack view greater than
Yeah.
one of the top or bottom constraints, or you make it proportional.
Any one of those solutions is going to work for this scenario because this is a table view cell. And it's going to grow no matter what.
If you make the cell also the exact height, then you won't have an error.
Yes.
Yeah, but that sucks.
But then anytime you change the content, then
Yeah.
yeah. But that's true. I usually do that too. I usually do that too. But it's a better practice to make your constraints work because sometimes it's not going to be a cell. It's going to be a fixed view
But the constraints will always work at runtime. It's always
for the cell. But if it's not a cell and it's a fixed size view or something like that, then you do want your constraints to be dynamic so that they don't break at runtime as well.
yeah.
But
But
you're-
this is a
I know.
table view cell.
You're right. Now, before we're done, I know I'm stealing 5 minutes of your time. One more tweak. Are you seeing something that bothers you here? Because I do.
Text got cut off.
Yes. How do we fix that? What do we do?
Set a constraint for hitting the other side of the cell, and then you can set rules on what to do when that happens, like resizing the text.
Stack view should do that for you.
Yeah, the stack view is already doing that.
Oh, you're
Make the line 0.
Yes.
Drop down.
Yes. There we go. So I'm going to select all of my labels and I'm gonna make the lines 0. Now, there was a way to do it. I don't know. There was a way to duplicate all the labels and make them seem double, right? Does anybody know?
Option graph. You want to duplicate it?
You gotta get in the assistant view.
Or was it in the scheme settings? Does somebody know what I'm talking about?
You know that language thing where it goes
Yes,
like that?
yes.
Isn't that in? Don't you have to see
Localization?
that in, like, the assistant view with like the
Is it?
yeah,
I forgot how to do it.
when you do the previews and the
In the preview. Oh, you're
Yeah.
right. Okay, it's in the preview. Okay. There's also a way to do it. I think it's in the arguments. Some
Yeah.
runtime setting. When you run it, it duplicates all the labels to show you how it's gonna work in German, like a really long, weird ass language. Okay, I'm gonna run it again, and behold, everything's broken. No. Oh, there we go. We just built the Meetup app in an hour. These guys should hire us. Thank you.
So the line setting, what was it before you changed to 0? Was it 1?
It was
Yeah.
1. The default is 1.
Okay, so basically it's trying to put the text on one line.
Yeah.
The
So
default
0.
is 1, and the font is usually like system font, size 17 or something like that. Those are terrible defaults, by the way. Those are not great defaults. And Apple recommends you to make it adaptive. So why don't you force it to be adaptive from the beginning, and then people don't have to remember. Okay, you got 2 minutes for questions, and then we're gonna hang out till 9:30 and clear out. So use your time to ask any questions. Start. Nobody wants to ask any questions? Okay, awesome. Let's go eat pizza.